So I've decided to let myself free from the editing mines for a little bit. That Cyberpunk video is looking to be over 3 hours long, so it's not going to be done. Honestly, I don't even want to give you an estimate of when it'll be done. So let's just move on to today's subject, which is the recent acquisitions by Microsoft and Sony. And honestly, I probably don't even have to make this video. I think you already know what my opinion of this is. I'm not even sure what to title this, because it certainly would be fitting to call this Gaming is Dying, something, something, whatever. But honestly, more specifically, it feels like the console wars are dying, and not in the way you might think. Because this is not really a war about exclusivity anymore, it's just a war of control about who can make the most money between Sony and Microsoft. I don't think either one of them gives a shit about exclusivity anymore. Microsoft has been putting like all of their games on PC for years now, and now Sony has put several of its major exclusives on PC. Now the quality of those ports is questionable, but the fact that now God of War 2018 is now on PC, that was one of the biggest exclusives of the last generation, and it wasn't a long list. At this point, they might as well just fucking throw Bloodborne on there. Make the PS4 obsolete. So if somehow you didn't hear, Microsoft acquired Activision-Blizzard for $70 billion. I don't know where the fuck they came up with that figure, because I don't think Activision has been worth that much money in probably close to 10 years at this point. Even with the continued success of Call of Duty throughout all these years, they don't really own anything else that people care about anymore. World of Warcraft has been irrelevant for years. Overwatch is borderline dead. Diablo is also basically dead outside of milking nostalgia. StarCraft is nowhere to be seen. As much as I love Spyro and Crash, they're pretty much irrelevant in the modern market. Nobody cares about 3D platformers anymore. And a lot of other beloved studios and franchises that are under Activision-Blizzard have either been put out of business or just essentially frozen in IP hell. They're basically EA at this point, where they just make money off of their couple games where they can sell $1 billion worth of microtransactions. And I have to guess that's the only reason Microsoft cares about them, other than just making the entire market smaller. Because the concept of a monopoly doesn't even fucking exist anymore, you know? Just look at Disney, they basically control the majority of revenue from all of film, and nobody does anything about it because they're Disney. And that's where gaming is headed, where Microsoft and Sony are going to make the vast majority of money, and Nintendo's just going to be off on the side doing its own thing, never truly improving and never reaching the heights of the 2000s era. But it doesn't matter because a bunch of soy boys will buy their shitty games anyway. In more recent news, Sony acquired Bungie. And can you imagine somebody telling you 10 years ago that Sony would buy Bungie? I thought Bungie left Microsoft to have some independence and do their own thing. And then, of course, they joined up with Activision, so it was kind of pointless. And then just, 2 years ago, they left Activision to be independent. I guess that didn't work out. And actually, I just realized this. Microsoft was just a couple years off from owning Bungie again. That's kind of funny in a sad way. And I don't exactly keep up with what's going on during Destiny 2, but I remember just hearing that it went to shit. Maybe it's recovered a bit since then, but I would imagine that the money they're getting from microtransactions must be in the toilet if they're selling out. So to come back to my earlier point about console wars, part of the reason I think console wars are dead effectively is that there's too much money to be made by putting your games or your intellectual property on your competitor's system. This is something we've seen a lot on PC lately, as I said earlier, but also Sony confirmed that the nature of the Bungie deal is not one of exclusivity. So Destiny 3 or maybe some other IP, whatever they're working on, is likely going to be on Xbox. And 2, I already know for a fact, pretty much, that Microsoft is not going to make any of Bethesda or Activision-Blizzard's IPs exclusive either, because at the end of the day, this is just about money, right? They want to make the most amount of money, and no longer is that money in consoles. In the past, there was a real benefit to having your console outsell the other one. Now, you might as well just own all of the intellectual properties that make money, and then the cash just comes flowing in when it's on every system. Then you're always winning. There's no reason to have real competition anymore. And yeah, of course I predict more acquisitions like this in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point Ubisoft sells out, and if it does, well, I hate Ubisoft, so I can't say I'll feel much of anything, but I could even foresee EA being next after. If I had to name specific publishers, I'd say Sony's probably going to try and get Square Enix in the next few years. Pretty much everything Square does is shit in the modern times, and they actually own some IPs I care about. Deus Ex probably being the biggest one at this point. Final Fantasy has been thoroughly abused. Dragon Quest, I guess, is in an okay spot. And I'll admit, I'm not exactly an expert on the new Tomb Raider games. I only played the first of the reboot series, and I really wasn't that impressed. And at a certain point, it really just depends on how far these companies are willing to go. Would Namco Bandai be big enough to be worth targeting? What about Koei Tecmo? THQ Nordic? I mean, pretty much the options are limitless. If Sony and Microsoft really want to be the last two companies standing, they could probably do it. Especially Microsoft. Microsoft has so much fucking money that could blow. And then it's just down to the big three publishers that control everything. I mean, sure, indie games are a very vast market at this point, but also they probably only control maybe 5% at the very most of all revenue made from video games. And it's probably considerably less than that. So yeah, for you and me, people who actually do care about the gaming industry, we can always just play old games that we've never played or buy these indie games, right? But on some level, I am still attached to the wider AAA industry. Most of my favorite games I've ever played were technically AAA games, or at least high-end middleware games. But almost all of those games came out 10 years ago or more, so obviously the industry looked a lot different back then. I've seen some people optimistic that somehow Microsoft or Sony is going to improve management at these companies and they'll make better products. I have no idea why people think that. There's literally no evidence to believe that whatsoever. Even if Bobby Kotick is finally kicked out of Activision, I mean, who gives a shit? You really think he was the sole reason the games were shit? Probably the only thing he influenced was monetization methods in the games, which again is never a good thing. Who the hell likes microtransactions, right? But you can still make a good game with microtransactions in it. People are missing the wider picture here, that developers are getting worse. And it's not that the people themselves have lost their past skill, it's that untalented people are being hired. And I think you know who those people are, okay? The type of people who get paraded out in front of a studio every time they need diversity points. But I'm not going to go into another one of those rants in this video, I promise. On some level, I'm not even sure what to expect from this. I don't think much is going to change on the player side, especially for me specifically because I play on PC, so almost all of these games will be on there. And if GPU prices hadn't gone through the roof and stayed through the roof for like 2 fucking years, I would have told you in this video, you should build a PC because every game's gonna be on PC, but if you think PS5s are overpriced right now, try building a PC. And this will be slightly relevant to you guys as well, but I recently bought a PS5, so yes, I will talk about the new Horizon game and future PS5 exclusives as they come out. But ultimately, it's too early to tell what's going to happen now, because Microsoft has owned Bethesda for quite a while now, and nothing of consequence has happened yet, partially because they haven't actually released anything since then, except I guess Arcane released Deathloop, but that was already in development before the acquisition. So we might not see the effects of this for another 2 years, maybe even longer. But I feel pretty safe in my bet that this is not going to improve the industry in any way. I know that's a pretty safe bet, but I'm just saying, there are some delusional people out there. People will sip the fanboy Kool-Aid for any fucking company, dude. You have to remember that routinely I piss off Ubisoft fanboys, but I think before I made that Assassin's Creed Valhalla video, I didn't know Ubisoft fanboys existed. I thought it was just a myth. How could anybody have standards so low to be obsessed with Ubisoft? That's like being a fan of EA. But I guess it just reflects how low the standards are for modern AAA games, especially single-player ones, that people will defend any half-decent game even if it's a carbon copy of the last one. And yes, I am going on a tangent about a company that has nothing to do with this news, because that's what I do. I legitimately promise you I'm not trying to pad out this video, this is just how my brain wanders. But speaking of padding out the video, there's really not much more to say. I can't do my usual ultra black-pilled cynical take on this because honestly, I don't care about any of the companies involved in these acquisitions. And as much as I shit on Nintendo, I hope they never sell out. They still have a chance to make good games, they just refuse to try because people have so low expectations for them. And I should probably end it there because I got a fucking Cyberpunk video to make. Thanks for watching, do the things the algorithm likes. Thank you to my patrons for supporting me despite the fact I don't put any content on Patreon, sorry. I've been very busy and lazy simultaneously. It's an eternal struggle for me. But I do appreciate the support. And I also haven't streamed in a while, so I'll probably have to stream again pretty soon. I'll probably stream the first few hours of Dying Light 2, because why not, right? And I gotta get back to New Vegas, because that first stream was pretty fun. That's about it. I'll see you next time, guys.